How could a single piece of art alter the course of an entire invasion? In the spring of 1944, as the Allies prepared for the greatest amphibious assault in history, a critical piece of the puzzle was missing. They knew where the German coastal defenses were, but not what they looked like from the sea. The view that would matter, most to the tens of thousands of men storming ashore. This is the story of how one man, with pencils and paint, drew the invasion route for 3 entire Army Corps. His artwork didn't just guide them, it gave them a fighting chance. The man was Lieutenant Commander John Paget. He was not a career naval officer, but an architect and artist, a man more accustomed to the drafting table than the bridge of a warship. Yet his skills had found a unique and vital purpose within the Admiralties. Directorate of Naval Intelligence. His assignment, Operation Overlord, the Allied invasion of Nazi-occupied Europe. Paget's task was deceptively simple in concept, but monumentally complex in execution. Intelligence was pouring in from aerial reconnaissance photos, French resistance reports, and even holiday snapshots taken before the war. But these were flat, fragmented, and often taken from directly overhead. The men who would storm the beaches, the American V Corps at Omaha and Utah, the British XXX Corps at Gold, the British I Corps at Juno and Sword, needed to see the battlefield as they would see it. They needed to recognize the cliffs, the gullies, the sea walls, and the enemy strongpoints from the terrifying, low-angle perspective of a landing craft ramp. Paget was to create a visual guide, a pictorial map of the Normandy coast. Working in a secured room in London, Paget was buried under a mountain of intelligence. Each grainy photograph, each smuggled sketch, held a clue. His canvas was a series of large panoramic boards. He began to construct the enemy's fortress, line by meticulous line. He didn't just draw the landscape, he annotated it with military precision. Using a revolutionary technique, he employed an appreciative perspective. This wasn't a bird's-eye view, nor a straight-on elevation. It was a synthesized, three-dimensional rendering that showed the coastline, as it would, unfold before the eyes of a coxswain steering his craft through the surf. Every detail was researched, debated, and verified. That church spire at Colleville-sur-Mer, it was a likely artillery observation post. That draw at Vierville-sur-Mer, designated Exit D1, it was the only way off the beach for tanks. And Paget's drawing showed the German 80mm gun, emplacement covering it perfectly. By May of 1944, his work was complete. He had produced a series of stunning full-color panoramas. Each was a masterpiece of tactical intelligence. They showed not only the terrain and fortifications, but also the predicted fields of fire from machine gun nests, the locations of minefields, and the safest routes inland. The Paget panoramas, as they became known, were more than maps. They were prophetic visions of the battle to come. Pause. Little did the men who studied them know that within weeks, these drawings would be their only reliable guide through hell. D-Day, June 6, 1944. H-hour. As the first landing craft approached the French coast, the plan began to unravel. Thick cloud cover and aggressive anti-aircraft fire had scattered the airborne drops inland. A fierce channel storm had thrown the naval bombardment off schedule. At Omaha Beach particularly, the preparatory bombing had completely missed the German defenses. The men of the U.S. 1st and 29th Infantry divisions were heading into a kill zone that was largely intact. As the ramps dropped, chaos reigned. Landing craft were blown apart by mined obstacles. Officers carrying detailed maps were among the first casualties, their bodies and papers swallowed by the churning surf. Radio equipment was ruined by salt water. Navigation landmarks were obscured by smoke, fire, and the sheer chaos of battle. Units were scattered, leaders were dead, and the meticulously planned assault. Timetables were rendered meaningless in the first 5 minutes. On the beaches, especially at Bloody Omaha, the invasion was on the verge of catastrophic failure. The men were pinned, leaderless, and disoriented. They needed a miracle, or at the very least a sense of direction. And then the Paget panoramas re-emerged. They had not been forgotten. In the weeks leading up to D-Day, they had been reproduced by the thousands. They were printed on waterproof paper and distributed down to the company and platoon level. They had been briefed from, studied, and memorized. Now in the maelstrom, they provided a flicker of orientation. Pause. A young lieutenant, crouched behind a burned-out Sherman tank, pulls a sodden, crumpled sheet from his jacket. It's the Paget drawing of his sector of Omaha. Through the smoke, he matches the sketch to reality. That ridgeline, that house at the top of the draw, that bunker placement. It wasn't just a map. It was a view. He could now identify the source of the murderous, enfilading fire raking his platoon. He rallies a handful of Rangers, and using the panorama as a guide, they begin to pick their way up a defilade, a path they had only ever seen on paper to outflank the position. All along the 50-mile invasion front, similar scenes played out. British Centaur tanks at Gold. Beach used the landmarks on their Paget sheets to identify their assigned support lanes. Canadian engineers at Juneau located minefield gaps they had memorized from the drawings. The panoramas provided a common, instantly recognizable reference point in a situation where all other forms of communication had broken down. Paget's art gave the disorganized, bloodied assault forces something priceless: situational awareness. It allowed small ad hoc groups of survivors to coalesce, to identify objectives, and to begin the grim, yard-by-yard work of cracking Hitler's Atlantic Wall. By nightfall on June 6th, the Allies had secured their foothold in Normandy. The cost had been horrific, with over 10,000 casualties across the 5 beaches. But they had succeeded. And while no single factor won D-Day, the Paget panoramas played an unheralded but crucial role in turning chaos into a tenuous order. They had guided, quite literally, the 3 primary assault corps, over 75,000 men in the initial waves, to their objectives and beyond the beaches. For his extraordinary work, John Paget was awarded the prestigious Order of the British Empire. His panoramas remain today, some of the most remarkable artifacts of military intelligence, held in archives like the Royal Engineers Museum. They stand as a testament to the power of unconventional thinking, of applying an artist's eye to a soldier's problem. In a war dominated by steel and high explosives, victory on the shores of Normandy was also secured by watercolor and ink, by the steady hand of one man who drew the path to liberation.